She didn't leave with a fight. She left with silence. That's what broke you. They made you believe youth was everything. That smooth skin, playful eyes, and the right shade of lipstick were the keys to a woman's power. They lied. Carl Jung, in his most hidden writings, uncovered a truth that modern society still refuses to accept. There is a magnetic, erotic force that only awakens after 50. A power that doesn't come from performance, but from presence. Not from innocence, but from integration. It's the kind of energy that doesn't ask for attention. It pulls it without trying, and the deeper secret? This energy is built on 8 dirty vices, traits patriarchal culture has demonized because they make a woman uncontrollable. The combination of the 4th and 7th is so potent. Jung warned it could dismantle a man's ego in seconds, but only women who've faced their own shadow and lived to tell can access it. Today I'll show you why erotic power doesn't fade with age. It only just begins, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. You sit across the dinner table, same woman, same routine, but something's off. The soup is still hot, but the silence is colder than you remember. She's there, physically. She smiles when you pass the salt. She nods when you mention your day, but her eyes don't linger. Her voice doesn't rise or fall. It's as if she's learned to disappear without ever leaving the room. And you start to ask yourself, quietly, secretly, when did she stop? Seeing me? Or worse, when did I stop seeing her? You've done everything right. You worked hard. You stayed loyal. You kept things steady when everything around you changed. You were the provider, the protector, the one who didn't fall apart. But what if that's not what she needed? What if she wasn't looking for the man who could hold it all together, but the one who could fall apart with her? What if she never wanted a superhero, just someone fully alive? You remember the early years, don't you? The way she'd laugh before the punchline, the way your touch could unravel her without trying. Now, you touch her arm and she doesn't even flinch. Not out of anger, not from rejection, just absence. You didn't cheat, you didn't lie. But somehow, something between you cracked. Quietly, slowly, like a soft leak in the foundation, unnoticeable until the house starts sinking. That's what they never warned you about, that you could be faithful and still feel like a ghost in your own marriage. And then, one day, you see her, not your wife, not someone new, just a woman, older, not trying to look young, not fishing for compliments. But when she enters the room, you feel it. The atmosphere shifts, not because she's beautiful in the magazine way, but because she's present. She doesn't flirt. She doesn't perform. She doesn't need to. She looks at you, not with judgment, not with need, but with a kind of calm certainty that makes you want to be seen again. And in that moment, you realize it's not about age. It's not about beauty. It's about something far deeper, something you can't name, but you can feel, like standing in front of a fire you didn't know you missed. That woman doesn't carry youth, she carries wholeness. She's met her darkness, and she didn't flinch. She's not here to impress you, she's here to be, and that is more erotic than anything youth ever offered. In this video, we're going to explore what makes a woman like that. What makes her magnetic, not to the insecure, but to the evolved. You'll meet women who thought their time had passed until they awakened a power that had been waiting quietly all along. Let me tell you about Diane. She was 61, divorced, left for someone half her age, and she thought she was done. But what happened next was the beginning of everything. Diane was 61 when her husband of 28 years told her he was leaving. It wasn't a fight, no slammed doors, no shouting match, just a Tuesday morning, just a suitcase by the door, just the words, "I need to feel alive again," the woman he left for. 32, yoga teacher, bright laugh, zero grey hair. Diane didn't cry that night. She cleaned the kitchen, fed the cat. folded laundry she'd washed 2 days before, and then she sat on the floor of her closet and stared at the shoes she hadn't worn in years. That's when the noise began. Not outside, inside. A chorus of voices she didn't even know lived inside her. You let yourself go. You should have been more exciting. You're old now. Invisible. Start over. At your age? In the weeks that followed, Diane did what most women are conditioned to do when they're abandoned. She blamed herself. She dyed her hair, bought new makeup, signed up for Pilates. She downloaded an app and went on 3 dates with men who only wanted to talk about their exes or her body. She tried laughing a little louder, sipping wine a little slower, wearing dresses she hadn't felt comfortable in since her 40s. But none of it worked, because deep down, Diane wasn't trying to attract love. She was trying to prove she was still worthy of being seen. One night, sitting alone in a candle-lit bath, one of those self-care moments she read about online, she broke. Not in the dramatic Hollywood way, but quietly, painfully, completely. And from that silence, a question surfaced, one she hadn't dared to ask until then. Who am I, when I'm not trying to be desirable? She wrote it in a notebook, and then underlined it, twice. That question became a doorway, and like all real doorways, it didn't open to comfort. It opened to shadow. A week later, Diane stumbled upon a workshop in her neighborhood, The Erotic, Self Beyond Shame for Women Over 50. She almost laughed, almost scrolled past, but something in the title stopped her. Not the word erotic, the word shame. She showed up to that workshop in a turtleneck and jeans, sat in the back. Didn't say a word. The facilitator was a woman named Marla, 65, silver hair, no makeup, long skirt, and when she smiled it wasn't sweet, it was knowing. Ladies, Marla said, you've been told your power expired with your youth. But what if I told you real erotic power only arrives when you stop performing and start integrating? That night Diane didn't sleep, not because she was disturbed, but because she was stirred. Something ancient had shifted, like a door in her bones creaked open. Just enough for air to get through. She returned the next week, then the week after, then the month after that. Marla introduced her to the work of Carl Jung, shadow integration, archetypes, the wild woman. Diane learned that the parts of herself she had locked away, her rage, her hunger, her unapologetic truth, weren't flaws. They were keys. Keys she'd swallowed to stay appropriate, to be a good wife, to not be too much. One afternoon, during a group sharing, Diane said something she'd never said out loud. I'm not here to compete with youth. I'm here to embody truth. And in that moment, something clicked. She stopped dyeing her hair. She stopped apologizing before she spoke. She began dancing again, not to be watched, but to feel the pulse inside her feet. Men noticed her, but it was different now. They didn't compliment her figure. They leaned in, as if pulled by something they didn't fully understand. Because Diane no longer wore a mask. She wore her shadow, like perfume. She didn't try to be sexy. She became magnetic, not because she reclaimed her youth, but because she reclaimed herself. They told you to be soft, to be pleasing, to stay quiet, composed, agreeable. They called your power too much, your truth too loud, your desire inappropriate. But what if they were wrong? What if the very things they told you to hide are the very things that make you magnetic? Carl Jung believed that the hidden parts of us, the shadow, hold not our shame, but our strength. And when a woman reclaims those parts, she becomes a force that no evolved man can ignore. These are the 8 dirty vices. Not dirty because they are bad, but because they were forbidden. Let's begin with the first. Bold vulnerability. This is the vice of showing your desire without filters, no pretending, no performance, no apology. Most women were taught to make themselves smaller in love, to want quietly, to hint instead of name. But bold vulnerability says, I want this, I feel this, I need this. Not with shame, but with clarity. I once met a woman named Carla. She was 59 when she looked her lover in the eyes and said, touch me like I matter. No theatrics, no seduction, just presence. And in that moment, he didn't just see her, he met her soul. This kind of truth, it doesn't scare the right man. It summons him. Now from that truth, we step into power, sacred selfishness. The word selfish has been used to silence women for centuries, but there's a difference between ego and essence. Sacred selfishness is not about neglecting others. It's about including yourself. It's knowing that your pleasure is not optional. It is essential. Marianne, at 62, stopped pretending. She took her partner's hand, guided him gently and said, let me show you how I come alive. She didn't ask for permission. She offered a path, and he followed, willingly, gratefully, reverently. This isn't dominance, it's leadership, and the feminine leads best through invitation, which brings us to something society never wanted. You to feel proud imperfection. We've been told to smooth it, hide it, suck it in, cover it up. But what if every wrinkle, every soft curve, every scar was not a flaw, but a testament? Elaine used to dim the lights, cover her belly, apologize with her eyes. But one day at 64, she stood naked in front of her partner and said, this body gave life, held grief, danced through storms, and it is beautiful. He didn't laugh. He wept. Because confidence is not a look, it's a vibration, and that vibration gets stronger when we return to now. Total. Presence, not planning, not worrying how you look, not replaying what he said earlier, just here, now. Breathing, feeling, receiving. Lena used to keep a script in her head. She worried if she was doing it right, until she began to breathe with him. Move. With him, feel herself. He told her, you don't make love, you become it. That's the power of presence, and when you're that present, your inner world wakes up, which leads us to a power most women have never been allowed to own, forbidden imagination. Your fantasies are not dirty, they are divine. They are messages. From the deep well of your erotic soul, Julia kept hers hidden for decades, wrote them down and burned them, ashamed of how vivid, how raw, how alive they were, until she stopped asking, is this appropriate? And started asking, is this true for me? She began sharing them with herself, then with him, and something opened between them, a current of electricity no surface act could create. Desire begins in the psyche, in the shadow, in the parts you've been told not to touch. Touch them, because when you do, you awaken your next power, spiritual power. Deborah used to think sex was something separate from her soul, a thing she gave, not a place she entered. But when she lit candles, slowed down, breathed with intention, she said, this isn't sex. This is sacred ceremony. And her partner, he cried, not from release, but from recognition. This is what happens when the body and soul meet, and from that sacred union comes the boldest act of all. Conscious transgression, not rebellion for its own sake, but the holy act of saying, this rule no longer serves me, and I choose to break it. Yvette wore red lace to a family dinner. At 66, no reason, no occasion, just because she felt radiant. They judged. She smiled, because a woman who's walked through her own fire doesn't shrink for comfort. She burns brighter, and that fire, it doesn't have to move. It just has to be still. Which brings us to the final vice. Erotic stillness. No words, no movement, just presence so grounded it pulls the world in. Rosa, at 60, sat alone in a cafe. Didn't flirt. Didn't even smile, but when she looked up, a man across the room stood, walked toward her drawn, not by what she did, but by what she radiated. Stillness is power, because it is full. It is whole. It says, I am already enough, and I don't need. To chase, I attract. Each of these vices is not a flaw, not a weakness, not a sin. They are rites of passage, and when a woman stops hiding them, she doesn't become more seductive, she becomes unforgettable. Not every woman becomes this, not because she can't, but because she was never told she could. She was told to chase love, to soften her voice, to age quietly, to accept less, smile more, and never ask for too much. But something changes when a woman stops performing, when she turns inward, when she meets the parts of herself that were buried beneath years of should and don't. That's when she begins to remember she was never meant to be palatable. She was meant to be powerful. She was never meant to compete with youth. She was meant to embody truth. Carl Jung spoke often of the anima, the feminine archetype that lives in the male psyche, but there's something even deeper, something older, something almost mythic. He called it anima mundi, the soul of the world. And when a woman reclaims her shadow, her softness, her sexuality, her stillness, she doesn't just become attractive, she becomes archetypal. She stops being a woman men want and starts being a woman they remember, even if they don't know why. She becomes a mirror, a reflection, a revealer. She doesn't seduce your body. She invites your soul to remember itself, and that is the rarest kind of erotic power. It's not performative, it's not planned, it's not painted on, it rises naturally from the woman who has made peace with her fire and her fear, who no longer seeks permission, who doesn't ask, "Am I too much?" because she knows too much for who. She walks into a room and doesn't shrink. She expands, not loudly, not showily, but like a tide rising under your feet, undeniable, unstoppable, and steady. She's not trying to win you. She's waking something in you. And if you're a man watching this, you may have already felt her. You may still remember her, the one who didn't need anything from you, and yet changed everything in you. Not because of what she gave, but because of what she refused to hide. And if you're a woman watching, this maybe a quiet knowing is stirring in your chest. Maybe you've spent years cutting parts of yourself off just to be loved. Maybe you've asked, "What's wrong with me?" when the real question was, "What have I hidden just to survive?" What if what you were told to quiet when was your true power? What if the part of you that was too wild, too emotional, too much, was the part of you the world most needed? And what if the love you've been waiting for was the self you abandoned long ago? This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the one you were before the world taught you to be small. It's about picking up the pieces, not to fix yourself, but to remember that you were never broken. It's about walking with your shadow, dancing with your desire, and realizing this too is sacred. So now I ask you, gently, honestly, have you ever loved someone, but only the idea of them? Have you ever been loved? For a version of yourself that wasn't fully real? What would happen if you stopped performing and started becoming? This is not a journey for the faint of heart. It is a pilgrimage, a reclamation, a return. But if you've made it this far, then maybe, just maybe, you're ready. If something inside you stirred while listening, if a memory surfaced, a truth softened, or a part of you whispered, "I remember." Don't let it fade back into silence. This space isn't just for watching, it's for witnessing. And sometimes the most healing thing we can do is name the part of us we've kept hidden for too long. So I invite you, gently, honestly, to not just listen, but to respond. Tell me in the comments, what part of you did you silence just to be loved? And which part are you ready to reclaim, no matter what others think? And if someone comes to mind while listening, a woman who used to shine but now stays quiet, tag her, let her know she is not forgotten. She's not alone. If this stirred something real in you, then walk with me, not just by subscribing, but by staying open, by listening to the parts of you that have waited decades to speak. I'll be here, sharing more stories, more voices, more ways back home to yourself. And remember this, always. This is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you to shrink.